So, Craig, with whose permission is this equality happening? Humanities. Okay, so when you said that women were granted rights by society, you mean men?
At the time, men were the one that was were in charge of society, but that's what women fought for. Women starved themselves, chained themselves to railings, allowed themselves to be beaten just so that they could have the rights that men have. Yes, of course, because men were the ones that ran society. We had to agree, okay, maybe we should give women rights. And that is a fact that nobody can deny. Men were in charge, mostly have been, not every society in history, but the majority of them. And we had to allow women to have the rights, but they fought for that and they deserve what they fought for.
Well, first of all, it was just a very small handful of crazy terrorist women who did, like you said, they starved themselves, but they also bombed federal buildings and bombed storefronts and terrorized people, and this was a tiny minority. You said that it's not true that most women didn't want the vote and that they came out in huge numbers as soon as they got it. That's actually not true. In both the UK and the United States, only a tiny minority of women actually went to the polls until the 1960s. So they had the vote for like 40 years before most of them used it. And in, as I stated in my opening, in the referendums on whether women wanted the vote, only like in Massachusetts, they had a statewide referendum on this in the early 1900s. Only about 4% of women who even bothered to show up said they wanted the vote. That doesn't sound like a majority to me. That doesn't sound like a grassroots movement of women who just demanded these changes. That sounds to me like an astroturfed top-down thing. But that aside, again, if men granted women the rights, doesn't sound like they were this evil patriarchy just hoping to keep their boot on women's necks and hold them down. It could be that there were good reasons for things being the way they were for all of human history up until 100 years ago. So what you're going to find is that all of these arguments against feminism rely on framing. They rely on the fallacy of presentism, which is where we look back at history with our present eyes and our present ideals and judge it, which is not accurate. It's actually a logical fallacy to do that. So when Craig says things like, oh, women couldn't have, their own bank accounts or their own credit cards, do you guys think there could be a practical reason for this, or was it just men are mean and they don't want women to have money? In fact, there was a practical reason. And when he talks about laws being unequal during this time, he's right, because men were held to the standard of maintaining their families and supporting them. These laws were called breadwinner laws, which were, men could go to jail if they deserted their families or didn't support them, and only men could be held liable for debt. So the way it worked was, maybe you couldn't have a credit card in your own name as a woman because you usually weren't employed. You had someone taking care of you and paying your bills. So you could get on your husband's account at the department store or the grocery store and spend his money. You could run up the debt, but they couldn't hold you legally liable for it. He had to pay the bill. Sounds like a pretty good deal. I'd take that. So, and the same thing with women losing their jobs. This was a common thing. These were marriage bar laws. So if you were a teacher, it most often applied to teachers, they would have in your contract that once you got married, your job would be terminated. But once again, there was a good reason for this. They said, well, you're married, so your husband can support you, you're taken care of. We want these teaching jobs held open for young women who are not married yet, for widows, for older women who've never married. We'd like them to have the teaching jobs. So again, it's framing to make it sound like women were victims of something when really it was the patriarchy taking care of them, and things were logically done this way for the good of everyone.
Okay. Switch it into about 90-second responses. Go ahead, Craig.
So your claim that women didn't want the vote, the numbers disagree with you. In the United States, 2 million plus women were members of the National American Women's Suffrage by 1917. On the other side, the anti-suffrage women's group had around 350,000 members at the same time. And even historians say that number is probably inflated. That's like 5 to 1. 1913, Washington, D.C. suffrage parade had 8,000 women. You don't just get marches in the streets without there being actual people there. In the United Kingdom, the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies had over 50,000 women members by 1914. The WSPU, the suffragettes, had thousands more. Many were jailed, beaten, and force-fed. In the 1907 Mud March, had over 3,000 women publicly marching in the rain. Like, that was massive for the time. Meanwhile, the largest anti-suffrage women's group peaked at around 20,000 and then collapsed and merged with some men's organizations. So the reality is that women did want the vote in enormous numbers in organized structures over decades in every country where suffrage was won. Your claims require pretending that the marches didn't happen, the arrests didn't happen, the hunger strikes didn't happen, the petitions didn't happen, the letters weren't written, the organizations weren't real, the documents in the archives aren't there. That's just kind of erasing history, nothing else. The idea that women never wanted the vote collapses the moment you open an actual history book. In the US, over 2 million women proved that fact.
So again, we're relying on framing here. So you might notice he said, oh, by 1917, there was more membership in some of the pro-suffrage organizations than the antis. Yeah, because and this was not the case for decades running up to this. It was flip-flopped. And what happened is Cornelius Vanderbilt, Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, and some other rich benefactors paid to plump these numbers up. They paid money and funded this whole thing and created giant propaganda campaigns. They created newspapers, pamphlets, and kind of pushed everything that way. So no, it wasn't that women all got together and did this. It was a handful of people who pushed the propaganda, much like we see now when there's marches and people are being bussed in by NGOs and being paid by George Soros to show up and protest. This is true with almost every social revolution, by the way. It's almost never grassroots. If you go back and look, there's usually CIA or intelligence asset involvement, very rich billionaires who are funding these things, and they'll just monopolize the propaganda and push it and push it and push it for decades until they get seemingly enough people on board. So again, this is just a logical fallacy to say this was a groundswell of grassroots movement.
Rachel, quick question. You cite women's anti-suffrage groups, but if women never wanted the vote, why did they need an anti-suffrage movement?
Because they were opposed to suffrage for multiple reasons. They thought it was going to corrupt the family, pit man and woman against each other. They didn't want to have to be involved in the draft. They didn't want to have to do jury duty. They said, we can't secure the government. This is what I said in my opening. We can't protect the borders. We can't go off and fight wars. We can't protect persons and property. They said this is the point of government. If the point of government is to protect persons and property, and we're not capable of doing that, why would you task us with such a thing? So maybe you can answer that.
Well, the follow-up question is, why were the anti-suffrage groups always of lower numbers and
they weren't? That's not true. In the United States, they had much higher membership numbers up until about 2 to 3 years before they passed the 19th.
The data really doesn't show that. The historical records entirely disagree with that statement.
It's not true. I have multiple citations in my book and in articles that I've written. So
your book is wonderful. I've read it several times. And the first red flag for me was that it's a 170-something page book with only 30 citations. No credible academic source would have less than 30 citations in a paragraph. So, and your citations, when you actually dig into them, every single one of the citations that you used in your book were diametrically opposed to the points that you were making. You are extremely good at cherry-picking data, almost like a flat earther.
That's actually not true either. Again, we're relying on framing. So if you go read my book and you look at the source material, I take the writings of feminists themselves, like I just did with Susan B. Anthony. I quote the very women who were at the front lines of this, the ones who were usually bought and paid for and propped up to be the face of this movement, by the way. And they tell you themselves, Susan B. Anthony said, women don't want this. They have it too good. They have everything they want. They can go to college. So he said a lot of stuff in his opening that was also incorrect. Women were never legally barred from education. We had women's universities already in the 1800, in 1870. We had many of these institutions. It's true that there were a few Ivy League schools that didn't let women in, but so what? This is not some systemic oppression, right?
I do agree with those points that
and they were allowed to work, and they were allowed to have property, and just because, here's the thing, every time we look at women having any limit put on them, we pretend as though that was not true for men as well, and it was. So he said women didn't have the vote. That's true. Did you know that men only got the right to vote about 10 years before women did? All men couldn't always vote. And people just assume this because it's always framed and presented this way, as though all men had all the rights and no women had any rights, and it's simply just historically inaccurate. Women had all kinds of rights. Men took very good care of them, and this is one of the reasons they did cite wanting to be anti-suffragists, because they said, look, we have protection and provision right now that we're going to lose if you try to make us equal with men. We don't want to go out and work 40-hour weeks and raise kids and be in government and politics and have to, like, you know, vote in opposition to our own husbands. We don't like this idea. We think it's going to break up families, and that's what we care about.
Well, I disagree that it breaks up families. I've got actually quite a lot of data on the when you were talking about child neglect and things like that, and yes, it's with the rise of feminism, there's also the rise of that, but it's also the rise of Pokemon. There's been a rise of child neglect. You're doing a correlation, not causation thing there. And I'd love to actually go through the data with you at another point. I really want to talk to you about your book, because I did enjoy it a lot, honestly. But you just can't erase the fact that millions of women fought and marched and protested. Saying that women didn't want the vote is ignoring the fact that women were marching in the street saying, we want the vote.
Some women, a minority of women. So what?
Wasn't a minority.
It was a minority.
There was also a lot of women that wouldn't voice it, that they wanted it, because they were in the position of, well, my man maybe doesn't want me to vote, so I'm going to say that.
That's not what Susan B. Anthony said. She said that if women, by the way, this is the other great criticism everybody has of me, is that I'm a feminist because I wrote a book, or I'm a feminist because I'm here speaking to you. Again, 1902, Susan B. Anthony said, women are allowed to speak in public, women can write books. If we go back to the late 1700s, there were feminists writing polemics, touring, being single moms, right? Mary Wollstonecraft was a single mother who was paid to tour Europe and talk about feminism. She was paid to write. She made a living for herself off of writing about feminism in the late 1700s. So this idea that women couldn't do these things, it's a logical contradiction, because they had to do those things to even get feminism going.
Okay, nice. Sorry, I was getting a bit of feedback out of those.
But if you hold your mic up closer, you won't have to boost your audio.
Okay. Yeah, so not all women were voicing their opinions. At the advent of feminism, a lot of women just weren't speaking up because they were very used to really not speaking up. Now, I'm going to agree with you that, yeah, women could teach and stuff before, but it was frowned upon in society in a lot of times. I'm not going to go listen to a woman talk. Who wants to listen to a woman talk? Whereas now, Rachel, you can stand on stage with an entire room of people that absolutely love listening to you. You are influencing these people in a way that feminism has attributed you the right to do.
That's not true. I just got done debunking that idea.
Let me finish my point. It's not just what the data shows, it's what the people's attitudes were. The men were the ones that were deciding what was happening. The men were saying to the women, oh, maybe you shouldn't have the vote. And the
men are still the ones deciding what's happening. I wouldn't be able to do this right now without men. This microphone I'm holding was invented by a man. A man plugged this in. James is running this whole debate.
And the woman can do that,
This
right?
Electricity, this technology, this building that we're sitting in is built by men, and it's maintained by
so
men.
The
and women cannot do that.
The advancement of hold on. Who wrote the software that sent men to the moon?
Oh, women of color?
No. Who cares about the color?
They got it right the first time, by the way, by hand.
Who cares about the color? The woman wrote the software for a man to go to the moon, and they chose a woman to do that because she was the best one to do it at the time. In fact, before we had computers, like we call computers were usually women that were doing lots of math really, really quickly. That was what a computer was.
So do you think those women can build and maintain the infrastructure that allows us to have technology?
Absolutely they can. There's no reason why a woman could not use the tools that a man uses.
That's really weird, because I've noticed this bizarre thing that feminism magically came about after the technological and industrial revolutions. Isn't it weird that we had thousands of years of history that women never dominated, feminism never came about? It's almost like we needed the industrial revolution and the technological revolution to produce technology that gave us this illusion that women are equal with men and that they can do everything a man can do. Over 90% of infrastructure jobs are still held by men. And it's not because women haven't been pushed to do it. It's not because they because they just want to do it and the evil misogynists are keeping them out. Number one, they can't. Physically, they cannot run oil rigs. They cannot pour concrete all day. They cannot do roofing. They cannot. Physically, they can't do those things for more, if they can do them at all.
The largest building group where I live in Fife is run by women, and the majority of their employees are women. And one of them is successful.
What is it? Say the
I live
first
in
part?
a place called Fife in Scotland.
Okay.
And the largest building group is, a lot of their employees are women, and their CEO is a woman. Sorry.
Okay, who's putting up the steel beams? Who's laying the concrete?
The women that are doing the work, using the tools.
Oh, are?
There's no reason that a woman can't put some concrete into a thing, put it on to melt, and then pour it out. Tools allow you to do things. I was in the military, and I trained with lots of women that would go on the marches alongside me, and just be just as able to have endurance.
That's weird, because why don't we have any female Green Berets or Navy SEALs? After decades of them desperately trying to produce one, and they've still never been able to do it. Why do you think that is?
Because men are stronger, and the standards to get in are based on you doing this, and men are not. I'm never going to deny the fact you are 100% right. Men are bigger and stronger.
Yes.
But we live in a world where now, maybe before, obviously to get things started, maybe we needed bigger men to make the machines in the first place. But now we live in a world where the machines already exist to make other machines.
So you agree
that can
with
make
me?
Tools.
He agrees
Hold
with
on
me.
1 second,
he
please.
He just conceded that it was men who created technological advancements that even made it
Rachel,
possible to imagine that women could be on par with men.
Rachel, that is the point. That is
Thank
the
you.
beginning. That is where it started. But we live in a world now where it doesn't need to be just the men. A woman can do the job just as well as a man if the tools are available.
So it's just tools.
Well, the tools exist now.
So
and women can also make tools.
Have you ever seen the viral videos of men running oil rigs and going down into sewers and dealing with that sort of thing?
Are you saying there's 0 women that work on oil rigs?
There are almost 0 women in the
almost
hard
0,
labor.
or are there 0?
It doesn't matter if there's an outlier.
Of course it matters, because if you're saying that women can't do this job, that would mean that there has to be no women doing this job. If there is women doing this job, then that means women are capable of doing this job.
He's literally doing the meme where you say most women are shorter than men, and some woman goes, but I'm 5'7" though, and I know a man that's 5'4". It's
literally not what I'm saying. Your claim was that women can't work on oil rigs. That was the word you said. I'm not misquoting you. You said women. Then Rachel, why are there women that work on oil rigs? Why is that?
There aren't women that do the actual hard labor.
Are you claiming there is 0? Rachel,
pulling the 300, 400-pound things. Have you ever seen a woman lift a 400-pound diesel engine and drop it into a truck?
Are you claiming there is no women in the world that do that job?
I'm claiming that women as a group cannot maintain...
No, Rachel, come on, stop avoiding the question.
Claim. Don't straw man my claim.
Is there any women in the world that do the job?
I'll grant it doesn't matter, because what I'm saying is...
she won't admit it. She won't admit that women are able to do the job.
She's saying women are incapable of doing. Maybe some women are. It has no bearing. Because here's the question, Craig. Here's the question. Can women as a whole keep the infrastructure that maintains this modern world going without men?
Yeah.
No, they can't.
Why not?
Well, you love science, right?
Yes.
So... scientifically, let's think about this. If tomorrow all women disappeared from planet Earth and only men were left, how do you think people would do? Do you think that they could keep electricity going? They could keep food supply lines
Honestly, most men are pretty stupid, and we'd be dead in a few weeks without the women.
Wow.
Come on. Every husband here knows for a fact that their wife has kept them alive, and you can't argue with me.
I didn't know I was debating like the final boss of Simps today, but here we are. So
I'm not going to deny that I adore women. I see the value. I see the value and the power that women can have, but I in no way think women are above men.
So
and that's one thing I just want to...
Hold on, give me
1 sec. Give me 1 sec.
Sure.
That's what I want to make clear. I am never going to claim that we should bow down to women and, women should be in charge. I just think that women should be afforded, if they want to do these things, the opportunity and the ability and the rights to do it.
Well, they've had that for 100 years, and they don't want to do it. Guess what? The women here don't want to do sewage treatment work.
Maybe these women don't, but there's some that do.
They don't want to pour concrete. They don't want to do cell phone tower maintenance where you're climbing,
Rachel, then why is there people that do that are women?
There aren't.
None at all.
It's a tiny...
once again, she's claiming that
it doesn't matter. It doesn't, as we've said...
It doesn't matter. This is not...
It doesn't matter. Pointing to an outlier does not mean that women as a group could maintain modern technical infrastructure.
Rachel,
I can't believe that a guy who believes in science is sitting here trying to get you all to believe that if men disappeared from the planet tomorrow, which is part 2 of my question, let me get it out. Part two
That's
of the
what she
question.
said.
All men disappear from planet Earth tomorrow, and it's only women. How long do you think people survive? How long do the lights stay on? How long do we have clean drinking water? How long do we have indoor plumbing? How long before buildings start collapsing, before elevators don't work? Because men are the ones that build and maintain these structures. Women, as a group, cannot and don't want to, but they cannot do it. It's not possible for women to do.
The world we live in now, with the tools that exist in the world that we live in now.
Who builds
hold
the
on,
tools?
let me finish, Rachel, please. The tools already exist. And your question is, if they disappeared now, and right now, the tools exist. So if all the men disappeared right now, the women would pick up the tools the men were using and keep things going.
That is hilarious. I love that. So you think, and by the way, I am a firearms instructor. I've trained women using firearms for years. And
pew pew.
Yeah. More than half of my female students do not have the hand strength to properly load a magazine and operate a semi-automatic pistol. I have to give them a revolver, something that's smaller, something their hand strength can handle. It usually takes me a good
That's
several...
a badly designed gun.
Huh?
It should be easy to load a gun. You shouldn't take that force.
Oh, it's spring-loaded. Maybe you're not familiar. You were in the military.
So
these
I use an
spring-loaded
SA-80,
magazines,
with the
yeah,
SA-80,
they take a
with
little bit of hand
SA-80,
strength.
one pullback, and anyone could do that.
The average
no
male has like double the hand strength that a woman has.
And the guns exist that are easy to load.
Sure, and look, there's a reason why I tell women to train with them, because they're the only thing that comes close to kind of equalizing force. It's really the only thing we've got.
Hold on.
But it's not enough.
Let me ask you a question.
To maintain, we're talking about maintaining the modern world, and I'd love for you to tell me how tomorrow, just because the tools exist, women are going to start building steel buildings. They're going to start laying concrete. They're going to start doing infrastructure jobs where you have to be able to lift hundreds of pounds.
Why would they not? Do you not know that exoskeletons are a thing? Right, you are posing it. You are positing it in a very specific way. If they disappeared now, we live in a world now where women can use tools to make them a lot stronger than they ever were.
I just want to jump in. Folks, if you're in the audience, I need you to, if you're going to say something to a friend, I need you to whisper it as quietly as possible, because I can hear from both sides. Some folks that are talking to a friend, and I can hear it as if it's at a normal volume. I need you to whisper it, or ideally don't do it at all, just so we can hear the speakers. Go ahead.
Sorry, what was I saying?
You were telling me how the strong, independent women are going to start laying concrete and doing roofing tomorrow because tools.
Well, do you agree that the tools exist that allow people to do these jobs?
The tools exist that allow men to do those jobs.
Why
could
women not
use
use those tools?
You don't put a jackhammer in Rachel's hand and she can suddenly operate it. I weigh
So is there any
140
women
pounds?
that can use jackhammers?
There might be some woman somewhere. Do you think that there are enough
I know women
women
specifically that use jackhammers.
So let's here's a good analogy to try to help you understand this. I don't know what's not computing. Let's imagine that we're trying to maintain populations and only 1% of women can give birth. Do you think we're going to maintain the population, or do you think we need far more than 1% of women to be able to do that in order to maintain it on a systemic level? It's the same thing with infrastructure. Just because you have one or two butch-ass chicks who can maybe do some of these things for a limited amount of time, you would never keep thousands of cities running. You would never keep nuclear power plants and oil rigs and sewage treatment plants going if only women had to run them. You need men for modern civilization. So again, this is all an illusion. The illusion women have that they're equal with men is built on the premise that this stuff just appeared here. These lights just appeared. This microphone I have the tool. The tool is here. We see this in certain places where we go to give tribal people modern tools. We give them water. We give them wells. And then when the people who give it to them leave, they cannot maintain it. They don't have the IQ, or they don't have the prerequisite skills to maintain what you've given them. It would be the same thing. And it's even if you have tools, they still require strength. Like I said, diesel engines. There's jobs that require multiple big, strong dudes with big, huge tools to build giant skyscrapers, to put sewer pipes into the ground. Like these big infrastructure jobs, it's just a fact of physics, and you're supposed to be a science and evidence guy.
Yeah, but
I don't
Rachel,
get
you're
this.
just saying that women can't do that.
They can't.
But there is
As a
women.
group,
There is women that do that. But there's
what
also,
would it matter if there's
also,
three women?
Wait,
You think
Rachel, can I just let you
Sally
talk
is
for
going to
ages?
just maintain the world on her own? Sally and Karen, the two that can theoretically do this?
Let's switch it over to Craig.
Thank you. So there's weak men as well as weak women. But there is more than enough women in the world that are capable of holding a jackhammer and moving trucks and loading things and using tools and conveyor belts and everything. There is more than enough women in the world that are smart enough and capable enough to use the tools that already exist to keep it going. You are just saying, I don't think women are strong enough to ever do this. You've got no data to back up that women can't do this. The fact that women do these jobs, even if it is an outlier.
Ryan or folks, if you can turn your phones off and keep the talking the audience down.
Yeah. The fact that women do these jobs that you are saying women can't do just disproves you. Yes, there's less of them. Maybe a lot of them don't want to do it, but some do. And that's what feminism is. Feminism is saying that you have to do this job. Feminism is saying that if you want to and you're able to, go on then.
Craig, the best argument you're making today is that I, as a woman, am better at understanding logic and physics than you, a scientist man. Like, that's your best argument, and the one that makes me feel like maybe you got me is the fact that I'm here with my blonde hair, looking like a bimbo, and understanding these very simple concepts better than a man who, debates scientifically for a living. You're actually sitting here trying to argue against physics and biology. You think men and women are equal and can do the same things? You think they have the same levels of strength, they have the same capacity? Or is it that, just one sec, because even if a couple women are stronger than men and a couple men are weaker than women, on average, that does not negate the whole, which is that on average, almost all men are stronger than almost all women. Just because you can point to an outlier doesn't prove your case. And as a guy who debates flat earthers, you should know this. And I know that you know it. So I don't even think you're being serious.
Your claim that there aren't enough women to do these jobs there's no data to back it up. So maybe right now, not a lot of women.
There is data to back it up.
Maybe right now, not a lot of women do those jobs. But if those jobs were needed because there is no men left, women would do it, and they would use the tools, and they would go, right, so I'm strong, maybe I should go and do that because that would be good for society right now because we need to keep the oil plants running.
Okay, here's a question. Let's say we do that. Let's say all the women take over all the infrastructure jobs. It's kind of like evolution, I guess, where you have enough time. If you have enough time, just excessive amounts of time, and somehow women are going to become men. It just changes into something else because time. Maybe it's like that. But let's say this happens. What? Let's say that women become strong enough to maintain the infrastructure that allows them to get strong enough to maintain the infrastructure. What happens to the birth rate?
If there's only women.
If women are maintaining the infrastructure. We just say, look, men, you've done enough. Just sit down and rest, kick up your feet. We've got this. We're going to take it from here.
But that's not what feminism is.
We do the Rosie the Riveter. We're like, we've got this. We're going to take care of the infrastructure. We've got this. Don't worry about it. Just sit back. You can take care of the kids. So we already see now that birth rates are falling below replacement levels. And the number one correlate worldwide, regardless of economics, regardless of race, country, anything, is women's access to higher education and their participation in the workforce. In other words, when you tell women, go work all day long, they don't want to have a bunch of kids. So if the women are maintaining the infrastructure, who births the babies? Who's going to raise them and breastfeed them and get pregnant and do all the labor and delivery?
So, right, yes, there is a fall in birth rates pretty much around the world at the moment. But the interesting thing is that the fall in birth rates also applies to countries that are extremely men, or countries that have nothing to do with feminism. A lot of those countries, the birth rates are also falling. So to claim that the fact that birth rates are falling is due to feminism ignores the fact that birth rate is also falling in countries where feminism is non-existent.
Well, I have a study here in my phone I can pull up.
I have several as well.
I have a bunch. They did a huge study.
I've got more than you.
They had a huge study in China. China's this big emerging global superpower, and they did a big study there. And they found there that the number one correlate to lower birth rates is women's access to education and work. This makes total sense. There were things that contributed to falling birth rates before that, like the birth control pill and other contraceptive methods, and then widespread acceptance and legalization of abortion. But that doesn't even account for the further drop we've seen in the decades since then. And what it is NGOs going in around the world to places like Africa, to places like Asia, and pushing women's liberation there, pushing women to school. So this is another thing that we've done. We've subsidized women's education, and we've pushed them into going to college around the world and told them, you can't have a good life without college. Children are a ball and chain. They're going to hold you back. They're going to be bad for you and make you vulnerable to abuse. So you need a college education, and you have to go to work instead. And when we do that, what we see is women don't have babies. Why? It's super intuitive. If you're spending your fertile years going to college and building a career, you're not going to have kids. If you do have kids, you're going to wait until you're in your 30s or later. So the average age a woman has her first child now in this country is close to 30. It used to be 20. And we're seeing maternal mortality rates go up in the modern world for the first time since we discovered germ theory and antibiotics, because women are waiting until they're in their late 30s or 40s to have babies, at which point it becomes more dangerous. The risk to the mother and to the child and birth defects all go up. So this is ass-backwards, stupid stuff to do if you want to maintain a civilization. You don't tell women to spend their fertile years pursuing higher education, which, by the way, I think like 80% of the field of psychology degrees are held by women. So all they do is the same stuff they've always done. If you look at the jobs in 1920 that women held and the jobs that women hold now, the top 20 jobs are almost exactly the same. We do early childhood care, we do nursing, we're retail workers, we're secretaries, and then there's like psychology and interior design and a lot of other fluffy stuff. And the only thing that changed was we swapped farm labor for HR work. So I don't know about you, but I think that we would rather have mothers producing babies so that human beings can continue to exist rather than just more HR ladies and psychologists.
Well, women can do both. Women can have babies and have jobs. My wife has worked most of her life. We had babies when 22 and 27, and she stopped work, went back to work, and there was no problem. I do agree with you that there's a falling rate of births. Now, here's a great thing. I am currently scripting a video which is basically debunking the claim that more babies equals better, because evolution would necessarily disagree with that claim. A lot of you will be very, actually, I would love the Crucible Crew's opinion on the video that I'm making about that, so yeah. But the fact that there's less birth doesn't necessarily mean that that is bad for society. That depends on the societal pressures. But linking women's rights to there now being less birth, it's not as clear cut as that. There's many other things that have influenced women to, have babies later that isn't necessarily down to feminism, just wanting to have a life beforehand. And the men are involved in that decision as well. A lot of the men don't want to have babies that young as well as the women. The men still, in the study that I was looking at, still men are the ones that decide that, okay, we're going to start a family. And that decision coming from men is happening later on, not just the women wanting babies later on.
Right. So you said that more babies doesn't necessarily equal better. Sure, I'll grant you that. But what do you think is going to happen to places like South Korea, which are at a 0.7 birth rate? The average South Korean woman isn't even replacing herself, let alone being at 2.1 to 2.2, where you need just to hold the population stable. And I don't know if you've looked into what happens when you have population collapse, but it's very catastrophic. We're looking at a future where we're not going to have enough young people to take care of older, aging populations, or to maintain the infrastructure we have now. Supply lines and supply chains are already suffering. We're already struggling to produce things the way we used to because of global population decline. Now, right now, there's something called population momentum. So people will go, well, there's billions of people on the planet. I don't think this is a problem. And it's like, yeah, right now, because, there's a life cycle, so it takes time to catch up. And what's going to happen, and people like Elon Musk have been talking about this now for a couple of years, what's going to happen is you're going to hit this point where it just kind of drops off. And places like Japan and Canada are already encouraging older people to euthanize themselves because they don't have the infrastructure to take care of these aging populations. No. We need to be stable at least. So I'm
going to agree with you 100% that the places like South Korea and even Japan and areas of China, the majority of the population are old people that need looking after, but there isn't enough younger people to do the looking after, which then leads problems to there's not enough people to do infrastructure. Yeah, but that isn't just a women's rights thing. There is many other things, and especially in South Korea. A lot of that came from changes in the government and things like that, which was nothing to do with women's rights. The government was saying, well, you need to start having babies at this time, and then especially in China with the one-child policy, that was nothing to do with women's rights. That was China thinking, oh shit, we've got too many people, stop having babies, and now they've not got enough people to do anything else.
Well, in my book, I explain how feminism comes from Malthusianism. So it comes from this idea that we're too overpopulated, that smaller populations would be better. Who likes this? It's not a conspiracy theory. They tell you in their own writings. The elite billionaires, the same people that we were talking about, technocracy yesterday, those same people who want like a technocratic future or a transhumanist future do want less people because they want a very small population that they can easily control, engineer, and manipulate. Those people are the ones that funded and pushed feminism and funded and pushed, literally created the birth control pill, and the same people who pushed to make abortion not only legal for the first time in the USSR under Lenin, but made it free and paid for by state hospitals up to birth with no reason given. And what happened in Russia is within less than 20 years of that policy, they had one live birth for every 3 abortions, and Stalin had to outlaw it again to prevent catastrophic population collapse. So this feminism is a death cult. It tells women that babies are bad, that being a mother is bad, you're not cool like the boss girls, you need to get out there and be something, you need to do something with your life. Don't just be a baby factory. I've been told this my whole life, that being a mom is like this gross thing that you do if you're not good enough to hack it in the business world or you're not smart enough to go to college. I chose not to go to college and have kids, and even the normal conservative women around me thought my life was over. They thought I was making this huge mistake and I was never going to recover. It's just crazy. So it's the propaganda and it's the mindset that is creating this impetus in women that their natural inclination to have a family, their natural inclination to be mothers during their fertile years is wrong, and that they need to act like men and be like men and compete with men. And I think it's bad for women, and I think all the statistics I went over in my opening shows this. Can you show me any metrics by which you think feminism has delivered on its promise to protect women and make life better for them?
I've actually got a bunch of studies on here. Oh my God, there's so much on here. So I wasn't expecting that very specific question. Right, rather than get into looking through my data to find that specific note, can we kind of look at the larger issues? I would gladly get that data back to you. In fact, I still owe Andrew some data from the last one, to be fair. All right.
Well, I mean, we just went over the fact that, they pushed no-fault divorce. The feminist movement, it was the National Association of Women Lawyers who pushed no-fault divorce and got it shoved through because they told women this was going to protect them from abusive relationships. But what we look at now, the data says that actually, no, the safest place by a factor of 8 to 12 times for a woman is married to her husband, not cohabitating with her boyfriend, not being a single lady and flying around having champagne brunch and going to Dubai. Those situations make you more vulnerable to abuse than marrying a guy. So that didn't work out.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get over the death cult claim, that one. A cult isolates you, restricts your freedoms, stops you learning, controls your choices, punishes dissent, demands obedience, reduces your autonomy, and treats people like property. And that kind of sounds like your worldview, not feminism. Feminism is kind of doing the opposite. It's giving you rights, giving you freedom, giving you choices, giving you education, letting you vote, letting you leave abusive men if you want to, letting you work, letting you have your own property, letting you exist as an actual fucking human being.
So did we not already establish the fact that women were allowed all of that before they got the vote? Before feminism became the dominant thing? Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, the two major figures in women's suffrage, both say women could own property, women could be educated. Women have had higher literacy rates in this country for a long time than men. And again, this is a framing problem. So we're acting as though men always had all rights. They did not. Most men never got past 5th grade education.
No, agreed.
Until recently, because they were meant to be cannon fodder in wars, or they were sent to the mines, or they worked on the farms, where they have far higher instances of death on the job than women have ever had. Still the case to this day. You're far more likely to die on the job than a woman if you're a man. Only men can be drafted. Right? So it's still men. Isn't this oppressive to men? Why shouldn't we liberate men from having to do all these things? Shouldn't we get in there, ladies? You get in there and you fight the wars and you run the farm equipment and you run all the dangerous, dirty, hard jobs. You do all that and let the men stay home and, learn piano and read books and play with toddlers all day. Why don't we do that? How is it only that women are oppressed?
But we don't have to force an entire... The point is choice, Rachel. If a woman,
there was choice before feminism. We've established
right,
this.
But here's the thing. Here's my point about that. Yes, with a lot of the things about feminism that people say are wrong, and you're right, the education rates even for men back in the time were lower. It's like when people that aren't Orthodox misuse the Bible, like, oh, this is what we should read it, when it was literally just the top level of Christianity that was supposed to read the Bible, and that for teaching purposes, right? But now we live in a world where it's very different. Nowadays, everyone has the ability to every bit of human information at their fingertips. Women can be just as smart as men now, and now we live in a world that is different from before. So now, why don't we just give women the choice to do what they want whenever they want? And back to your point of, they had the choice back then. Yeah, but a lot of men would say, no, you're not allowed to do that. And what feminism has done is it's softened a lot of men and realized that, well, which isn't good in every single way, I will agree.
Yeah.
I'm not for wokeness, just understand that very much triggers the fuck out of me. But the fact that women now, if they want, they can go and do these big hard jobs because the tools already exist. And men aren't going to go, no, you shouldn't do that, stay at home. That is what has changed, rather than just the legal right to do the thing. Does my point come across there?
Yeah, it does, yeah. But again, it's based on a huge lie, which is that women could do these things without men. So you're basically like, well, but men are allowing all this. And it's like, yeah, men are the ones, it's all an illusion. This is what's so insulting to women. Governments around the world prop up, certain, pushing women into STEM, subsidizing their education, putting out all this propaganda, telling them that they're not strong and independent, that they're going to be a loser if they choose to just be homemakers or be wives or submit to their husband, that this is bad. Right? This is what's actually oppressive to women, because it's all built on this idea, oh, well, now you have a choice. No, first of all, you had the choices before. You could speak publicly as a woman. This idea that you couldn't in the West, maybe under Sharia law, but that's an Islam problem. It's not a patriarchy problem. It's not a male problem. It's not men oppressing women specifically. We could do these things. We were allowed to do all kinds of things. There was nobody not allowing it. They didn't just legislate that women are second-class citizens. This is all garbage rhetoric, and it's all lies. And the biggest lie is that we don't need men to hold this illusion up for us and build a world that maintains this illusion and grant us these rights, and, of course, secure any notion of rights using their force, granting their force. I don't like being lied to. I don't like being patronized in this way and told that I'm equal with my husband. I can do everything that he can do. I should be more like him. That if I decide to, do what's more biologically natural to me and what's more ontologically suitable for me, that's bad. And there's a big thing we're missing here, which is that most women don't want to do this crap. None of the women here, as little girls were like, you know what? I really want to work in the waste management industry. I want to get on a garbage truck and pick up trash all day. I want to get in the sewers and, clear out rats and clogs.
Do men really want to do that either?
What's that?
Do men really want to do that?
No, but this is the thing. Men do because why? Duty. Because society says, look, you got to do this. If there's a war, sorry, buddy, you got to go die. You got to go do these difficult things. And a lot of feminists will argue that this is actually oppressive to men. I kind of agree with them. So it's like this idea that women were oppressed. No, we weren't oppressed. Men and women are just different. And men have had limitations throughout history on what they what was socially acceptable for them, and so have women, and there's actually nothing wrong with that. It's good and it's healthy, and we actually need it, because to the extent that we don't do that, we see society falling apart. Again, we just went over all of these stats, and Craig says that he doesn't think feminism is causal to these things. So maybe he can address, the amount of broken homes, the amount of fatherless homes, the amount of out-of-wedlock births, the massive increase in welfare spending. Again, we're like, if you look at them on a graph, the number of out-of-wedlock births and welfare spending, they go up like this in tandem to astronomical levels. So all you've done is replace fathers and husbands with daddy government. So maybe you can tell me how this wasn't feminism's fault and how this is actually better for anyone, but especially women and kids. The people it promised to protect are now the most vulnerable to, bad actors, to the men who will abuse. It didn't protect us. It actually made us more vulnerable.
Okay, so I don't want to straw man you. You are kind of claiming that the rise of feminism has also led to the rise of domestic abuse and child neglect. Is that correct?
It promised to decrease those things, and a consequence of it was that it increased by removing the people who had the most interest in protecting their own wife and kids.
So I think you're confusing reporting with occurrence.
Nope.
So before feminism, child abuse wasn't recorded or reported as much. Domestic violence wasn't really recorded. Police didn't intervene. It was like, that's a spousal problem. Schools didn't report it. Doctors didn't report it. Family matters. It's a private thing. That's like, you keep that in your family. Beating your wife and kids was kind of normalized, to the moon, that. Whereas now that's not a thing, because feminism has pushed forward the things like reporting domestic abuse, not standing for domestic abuse. I am never going to say that everything about feminism is good, especially the extremists, right? I don't like extremists of anything. Extremist Pokemon players, extremist DC comic collectors, extremist feminists, they're all bad. But the normal, just everyday feminist just wants to be able to do what they want to do without stigma and rules around it.
Too bad. There's always going to be stigma. There's always going to be rules. Sorry if you don't like them, but you're never going to be free of that. That's another just lie. That's another illusion. But there's a reason why in my opening I used the NIS studies, because we have 45 years of data. Now I'll grant that's not 450 years, but feminism still wasn't super dominant, and the culture hadn't completely shifted 45 years ago. You still had more stay-at-home moms, more traditional wives. If you watch sitcoms and shows from the 70s and 80s, you'll kind of see that this is true. These things are just starting to emerge. And if what you're saying is correct, we should have seen, because we had reporting, we had plenty of reporting, because the NIS, and this is the reason I use it, they don't just go off of women who call the police if they're abused. They go by every authority that has to report suspected or confirmed abuse, either one. So places like emergency rooms, battered women's shelters, school counselors, all the reporting people. So regardless of whether the woman or the child reports it, they're counting this as abuse. So we should still, even regardless of maybe there's more reporting or whatever now, we shouldn't see the rates of domestic violence go up. And we shouldn't see that women in relationships together have the highest rates of domestic violence if men are the threat. That doesn't make sense, and it's contradictory to what your claims are.
There's
give you a pithy response, Craig. Then we do have to go into the Q&A.
Excluding women. Yeah, sorry, I'm busy, guys.
The patriarchy has arrived.
I don't think any questions are going to be for you. They're all going to have a go at me, right? Have you got your tomatoes ready?
They're just going to ask me how I became so awesome, and I'll say it's because I'm.
I mean, you are pretty damn awesome. I'll give you that.
Thank you.
So I'll just give kind of a final thought. The whole, when you were saying about women in STEM is pushed and it's bad, and I see that as completely false, because especially in STEM and in science, there's been a bias for a long time in the way the science is done and the results, because only men were doing it. Since women have been introduced to STEM a lot more, the results in scientific studies, the way that science is done, the trials that are conducted, a lot of the biases that men put into the science has been removed, which has led to an increase in technological advancement and a benefit for society overall. I 100% agree with you that women are not maybe suited for every single job in the world, but at the same time, men aren't suited for every single job in the world. Women have their specific uses in certain circumstances, but if they're able to, they should be able to do what they want without having to beg a man for permission. That, I just think that women are capable, more capable than men have given them credit for.
And I should be skinny with no effort and be able to eat whatever I want and never
I
get
wish that was
wrinkles
the
as I
case.
get old and fly on unicorns because that sounds like fun. I mean, we could sit here all day and talk about, you know, like, oh, everyone should be able to do whatever they want, but that's not even dealing in reality. And here's the problem that you have with your, it's good that we took the bias out of science. It's actually not true. We actually added more and different bias. It's called standpoint theory, and it was introduced through women's studies programs in the early 70s. And it was pushed into a lot of the STEM fields, and a lot of people don't know this, but the Challenger explosion, if you guys remember that, I think it was 1985, that was actually a failure of feminist standpoint theory being pushed into the sciences, where the lead engineers for the Challenger team said, the conditions for this are really bad. We should not launch. It's going to crash. The temperatures are all wrong. It's not going to work out. And you can go on YouTube and see the lead engineer crying in a video talking about this. And they said, no, because that would, it would violate a lot of the like equality stuff that we have in the program. We have to give people a chance to do this launch because everybody worked hard in the marketing team and blah, blah, blah. Standpoint theory has actually ruined science. It hasn't. It's just introduced new, different bias.
So just one
response because it was new info, but then we got to go to the question and answer.
I agree that forcing we have to have more women because of equality, that's a bad thing. Like taking away roles from men that could do it better than certain women is a stupid thing to do. Forcing women into a role because we need to meet our equality guidelines is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. So I 100% agree with you there. Can I say based as well?
Yeah.
Based.